Will the victims of guardianship abuse be able to see any sort of criminal charges against folks involved in the system who might have been abusive towards them, such as attorneys?
Not a part of this legislation, correct, Charlie?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be, oh my God. This to me is the government realizing all of a sudden how much money there really is in conservatorships and wanting a little bit of piece of this pie for themselves.
Welcome back, everyone. Britney Spears' public outcry over her 13-year conservatorship is now being heard on Capitol Hill. Today, a bipartisan bill was introduced in Congress that could give Britney and many others the right to ask a judge to replace a guardian or conservator without having to prove misconduct or abuse. About 1.5 million Americans are now under a guardianship or conservatorship, and they could be impacted. Tonight, we're joined by the bill's co-sponsor, Representative Nancy Mace, Republican from South Carolina. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Congresswoman.
What in the Lou Taylor playbook hell is that? Allegedly, it was supposed to be called the Free Act.
You're calling this bill the, quote, Free Britney Act.
Right.
Britney's name is not even mentioned in the title of this legislation.
Free Britney Act.
Oh, God.
When we first heard about this, it was called the Free Britney Act, and it was 2 days ago. And we made a video. Was it yesterday? I can't even keep the days now. When we first learned about this on Good Morning America, that's the first place I heard about it, it was called the Free Britney Act. Then shortly after, we started dragging it across the internet for being, frankly, pro-conservator and pro-conservatorship. All of a sudden, people in the media started lying and saying, oh no, it's incorrect. That wasn't the right name of it.
This is not titled the Free Britney Act.
It was supposed to be the Free Act, which, what a stupid name.
Britney's name is not even mentioned in the title of this legislation.
The free of what? It doesn't actually help nobody to get free of anything. The only thing getting freed by this act is your tax dollars to pay public serving guardians and conservators. That's what's going to be free. Your tax dollars are going to be freed from a fund to make more conservators. That's what it's going to be free. That's the only thing going to be free. So I think it's weird they would call it the Free Act. But upon further examination, you see somebody lied, because it is definitely called the Free Britney Act. Not on this paper, because my printer. Section 1 is the title. Section 1 says the Free Britney Act is the name of the proposed thing. Section 2 says grants to states for state-employed caseworkers, legal guardians, and conservators for legally incompetent adults. A, in general, the secretary, I don't know which secretary, talking about Secretary of State, may make grants to eligible states in accordance with this section for the provision of state-employed caseworkers, legal guardians, and conservators for legally incompetent adults. Eligibility. A state is eligible for a grant under this section if the Secretary of State determines that the state has an up-to-date database of all legal guardianships and conservatorships that have been established. You're eligible if the state law will require a caseworker who is a state employee to be appointed for each individual who is subject to a guardianship or conservatorship, and to be empowered notwithstanding any objection of the legal guardian, conservator, blah, 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 to assist the conservatee in petitioning the court to not terminate the conservatorship, no, petitioning the court to replace the legal guardian. So that's a bunch of fancy legal words for, if a state does these things, then it'll qualify for this money. So far on page 2, I don't see anything at all right here about the conservatee's rights, the ward's rights. All I'm seeing is there's gonna be some money, I don't know how much yet, on page 2, but some money is gonna be given from the federal government, that's your tax dollars, to the state government, also your tax dollars, to basically allow for there to be more conservators, more state guardians, more caseworkers, more people that are going to have to be state imposed on a conservatee who perhaps is in a conservatorship fraudulently, who's perhaps in an unconstitutional conservatorship like Britney Spears is. So far, this act is not going to help those people at all. And it's called the Free Britney Act. But listen, we're only on page 2. Let's see what happens in these 9 pages. Number 3 requirement to be an eligible state. The state law in that state must guarantee that notwithstanding any such guardianship or conservatorship, the conservatee will retain the right to communicate with a caseworker and to petition the court as described in paragraph 2. Now, you might have forgotten what happened in paragraph 2 and think that that gives them the right to petition to terminate their conservatorship. But if we go back to paragraph 2, actually all it does is gives them the right to communicate with a caseworker. I don't see how this would help Britney. I don't see how it would help anybody get free.
Not a part of this legislation. Correct, Charlie?
Yeah, right.
Right.
So y'all need to rethink the name of your act. Oh, it seems like you might have already done that because now you're not calling it anything. Number 4 requirement, the state law will require any state employee referred to in paragraph 2, that's those brand new, not yet existing. Right now, as we sit here today, this doesn't exist. If this law were to pass, all of a sudden we would have hundreds, if not perhaps thousands, of state caseworkers, legal guardians, and conservators being paid by state tax money, right? Requiring those, now they're calling them state employees. Like, we need more freaking government employees in this mix. Like, that's gonna help anything. It would require them to meet a financial disclosure requirement, any financial disclosure requirement that the state may establish. So the federal government's going, oh yeah, we're putting in oversight. We're gonna make them report their financial disclosures. Well, it's pretty flimsy because it just says anything the state wants to require them. You might be able to just say, oh, do you have a bank account? Yep, okay, you're a guardian. Like, who knows? Who knows? There's no real oversight or accountability here yet that I can see. There's no requirement here. It just 4 little bullet points that kind of say like, oh, you know, please tell us like some things. It's just really fluff to make it seem like they're doing something to try and help Free Britney. So that's pretty much it. So just to recap real quick, in order to be an eligible state that would receive funding from this act, you need to have a database of all of the legal guardianships and conservatorships established for legally incompetent adults. You need to have a state law that requires one of these government-paid caseworkers to be on each conservatorship case. So that tells me, you know, it's an incentive for more conservatorships because now you're gonna have more people that get to come in and have a job be incentivized for conservatorships existing. There's nothing here that incentivizes conservatorships to end. There's nothing here about accountability. All it says is to be eligible, you gotta have a database, you gotta have a caseworker for each one of these cases. Your state law has to guarantee that the conservatee or the ward will be able to talk to this state employee caseworker. And the state law has to require some not yet announced financial disclosure. But we don't know what the financial disclosure is. Okay. Doesn't really sound like a very difficult requirement to be getting all this money. How much money, you might be asking? Great question. The next section is about the amount. Grant amounts. Number 1, in general, the amount of the grant made to a state under this section is the state share of the amount made available to carry out this section. Okay. So essentially there's going to be like a huge government fund pot that each state is going to be allotted an amount, right? So the state share of the pot of money is the total number of how many conservatees that are in that state divided by the number of total conservatees in the whole country. So if you're state X and you have a whole bunch of conservatees and you're realizing you're getting a bigger piece of this pie the more conservatees you have, don't you think you're going to be incentivized to have more conservatees? It doesn't say, oh, every state gets the same amount no matter how many conservatees you have in your state, so figure it out. No. They're incentivizing states to have more conservatees, to have more conservatorships, because the more they have, the bigger piece of that pie, the bigger share they're going to get. So it really doesn't actually do anything. Still, we're on page 3. It still hasn't done anything to make sure there's no fraud. It does nothing to really ensure that there's due process. All I can think is, what is to stop these state-appointed guardians and these state-appointed caseworkers from turning out exactly like Samuel D. Ingham III. He was a state-appointed lawyer. Now, yeah, his piece of the pie wasn't coming out of the taxpayer fund. It was coming from Britney's estate. But I fail to see how this is gonna change that incentive. I don't actually care who's paying my paycheck. If I'm getting a paycheck, I'm gonna want that job to still keep existing. Does it matter to me if my boss is all of a sudden a state worker or a private worker? Hell no. It doesn't matter to me. I still need to get paid. My boss still has to pay me. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. It's a financial incentive, not only for the states to have more conservatorships or guardianships, whichever state you're in, but it's also a financial incentive for these state-appointed caseworkers to want to keep getting more and more money. The more, you know, conservatorships there are, the more cases they can be on. Like in that movie, I Care a Lot, she had like 65 wards. So that's the state share portion of it. Then the next section is the use of the grant. A state to which a grant is made under this section shall use the grant grant only to pay the salaries of state employees who are serving as caseworkers or legal guardians or conservators for legally incompetent adults, and to cover related administrative expenses. Who knows what that is? Is it kickbacks? Is it bonuses? Is it meals? Is it gas? Yeah, it's definitely gonna be, oh my God. This to me is the government realizing all of a sudden how much money there really is in conservatorships and wanting a little bit of piece of this pie for themselves. And we're gonna actually get to why I think that even more so down the road, but now I'm realizing for the first time, related administrative expenses? What in the Lou Taylor playbook hell is that? What is a related administrative expense for a position that doesn't even currently exist right now? What is that? What is this? Then you have annual reports. Within 90 days after the end of any fiscal year in which the grant is made to a state, under this section, the state shall submit to Congress a written report that specifies the following. What do we have? 5 things here. First thing, how the funds were used. Okay, cool, probably important to report. Number 2, the number of adults under legal guardianship or conservatorship. Yeah, because they need to know how many are in there to give you your state share, right? The number of petitions described in subsection B2 that were submitted to the courts. All right, let's see what subsection B2 is. Because a lot of times they be saying, oh, B2, thinking you're not gonna go back and read. So the number of petitions that were actually filed where the conservatee asked the court to change out their guardian to a public one, right? Congress wants to know that. Well, why? That's what you always have to keep asking yourself. Some human being or a group of humans sat down and wrote this. Out of the limitless and innumerous possibility that they could have written, this is what they wrote. And my question is why? Why is one of the 5 requirements of reporting to Congress need to be how many private guardians were switched out with public ones? The first thing that comes to my mind is a financial incentive. They want to know how much money they can expect to be coming in. They want to keep track of the metrics of how fast it's going up or down. I do not see how reporting to Congress how many conservatees swapped out their trafficker offers any help to someone who is saying they're in a fraudulent, illegal, or unconstitutional conservatorship. I just don't see how this helps, other than to keep an accounting of how much money you might be expecting to come in. Now, correct me if you can think of something different, but that's really all I can come up with. The 4th thing, Congress wants to know the ratio of the number of individuals under a guardianship, so how many people are in a conservatorship, take that number on the top of the fraction, to the bottom of the fraction is gonna be how many of those state-employed legal guardians there are. They wanna keep if there's 5 legal guardians in a state on the bottom of the fraction, but 500 conservatees at the top, well, that might mean that those people at the bottom is probably overworked or something like that. But again, how is this helping somebody to get out of a fraudulent conservatorship?
Not a part of this legislation.
How is this holding anyone accountable who did put someone into a fraudulent conservatorship?
Correct, Charlie?
Yeah, right.
Right.
How is that helping someone to gain their civil rights and liberties? How is that preventing someone from losing their civil rights and liberties? Why do you want to know the ratio here whenever what you should be doing is protecting somebody's legal rights? I don't get it. Make it make sense to me. 5th and final thing that you have to put in your annual report is how many people in the state who were emancipated from a legal guardianship or conservatorship. They don't want to know how you helped them. They don't want to impose any way to help. They don't want to provide funding for anybody who got some people out. They don't want to provide funding for perhaps rehabilitation. They want to know simply how many people got out of conservatorships in your state. And again, why is that what you're asking for in your annual report? There's 5 things you're asking for: how the funds were used, how many people were in conservatorship, how many people petitioned to swap out their conservator with a state conservator, the ratio of how many people are in a conservatorship versus state-sanctioned conservators, and how many people got out of conservatorships. That's what they want to know. That's all you have to tell Congress in your annual report. You don't have to tell them how you managed to overcome fraud. You don't have to tell them any investigations where you found fraud. You don't have to tell them anything that you did at all. It's just numbers. It just makes me ask why. And I'm going to renew my question on page 4 as to how this helps free anyone. Why is it called the Free Britney Act, Congress? Nancy Mace, Charlie Crist, why are you calling it a free act? Nothing in here is free. All I'm seeing is more taxpayer monies to more conservators. That's all I'm seeing. How's it free? Free what? Free reign on our freaking freedoms? Next section, limitations on authorization of appropriations. So here's the limitations. Just like Gladstone Jones said, this is lawyers gone wild. This is astronomically inappropriate. In general, for grants under this section, they're authorized to be appropriated to the secretary not more than $260 million. So this, earlier I tweeted, and I would like to amend now, that this was per state. That is incorrect. This is $260 million for a pot. right? The big pie that each state gets a little piece of. They're all gonna be competing over this $260 million. That is perverse. That incentivizes more conservatorships. You're giving states free money to lock people up. This is wrong. This is wrong. And I'm gonna give y'all the benefit of the doubt and say that the conservatorship lobby just put this on your desk and you called it the Free Britney Act and went about your business, because I really, really don't want to live in a world where our elected officials wrote this, because this is a massive infringement on our freedoms and our liberties, and it is going to financially incentivize in the hundreds of millions states to lock its own people up. This needs to be dead on arrival. This is a bipartisan failure. Corruption is bipartisan. Y'all need to remember that. 160 million of this 260 million is going to be for the states to hire caseworkers for legally incompetent adults, but they don't say, oh, this is the definition of legally incompetent. They have to pass these metrics. They have to fail these tests. They have to have 5 doctors. 5 doctors have to say they can't live their own life. No, 2 doctors, 1, no. They're just leaving it up to the states to decide what legally incompetent means. And you get a piece of this $260 million pie. So 160 million of the 260 is gonna go to hire caseworkers. 100 of the 260 is gonna go to actually hiring state-imposed conservators. State, federally funded conservators. Federally funded conservatorships. Federally funded legal guardians to tell you you can't get in your car and go somewhere. To tell you that they get to decide if you're gonna swipe your debit card today. To tell you you have to keep an IUD in your body. To tell you you can't see your kids or your mom. Federally funded, 260 million, and calling it the Free Somebody Act. The amounts made available under paragraph 1 are authorized to remain available until they're gone, and I'm sure it would be renewed if this were to have been passed. I'm not here for this. Do not say this is the Free Nobody Nothing. This is the Take Away Your Liberty movement. This is the Make It Worse Act. This has nothing to do with Free Britney, nothing to do with Free Nobody. This is a farce and it's insulting. Secretary is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Okay, excuse me. I had said the Secretary of State earlier. It was the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Then they go into section 3 and it looks like it's about to start to get promising because it's titled Protection of Rights of Legally Incompetent Adults Who Are the Subject of Legal Guardianship or Conservatorship. Protection of rights. Okay, all right, Congress, we're thinking. This is good. Hey, findings. Okay, so now Congress can tell us their findings, which I'm gonna give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. Some of them are not true. Number 1, in November 2019, there's an article that came out about a guardian who stole, I'm paraphrasing, like $500,000 from an elderly man. Okay, so she stole like $1 million. That's bad. Okay, that shouldn't have happened. I agree. Number 2, also August 2019, there was another article, deliberate isolation of their wards from their families, financial exploitation, do not resuscitate orders without permission. That sucks. I agree. Okay, here we go. This is how you really know that this is just a money grab by the government. Private guardians are at risk for financial conflicts of interest because a ward's assets, which they usually control, are used to pay the guardian for their services. Now, I agree that this is a huge conflict of interest. It's a very, very big problem. But then the solution that Congress is proposing is actually not a solution, because what they just said is private guardians are at risk for a financial conflict of interest. And then they say, why? What's to stop somebody like Jody Montgomery from being one of these people? How are you not in a conflict of interest? What's to stop the state X that we established in that jurisdiction earlier from saying, oh man, let's lower what it actually means to be legally incompetent? And then you're just hoping that the state hopefully spends the money the right way? Come on, y'all. I might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night.
I've never heard that one.
My grandma always says that. Use that cut. Many persons declared incapacitated by a judge and assigned a private guardian have not even appeared in court. Cool, okay, good point. We're getting excited here. So 2 big problems here they've outlined. Professional private fiduciaries and guardians have these financial conflicts of interest. And people that are declared incapacitated by a judge often aren't even seen by a court. True, same thing happened to Britney Jean Spears. Person deemed incapacitated lacks the legal authority to petition to have their guardian removed or replaced if they believe they are being victimized. This is not true. And that's where I'm gonna start disagreeing with you, Mr. Christ. Sorry I'm calling you out, but you're the one who put your name on this lie. You should actually have your aides and your staffers look into the jurisdictions throughout the country, because it's not the case that a person deemed incapacitated lacks the legal authority to petition to have their guardian removed or replaced, because in fact, many people have so done in the past. So Sort that one out. Now this is where they're going to start trying to use our movement, our labor, and our hard work in order to pass this pro-conservatorship bill. Number 6, pop icon Britney Spears has unsuccessfully petitioned the judicial system to remove her father as her conservatorship for years, and this is also incorrect. She's never not once ever petitioned the court to remove her father. In fact, it was her, drum roll please, state-imposed legal fiduciary, her state-imposed court-appointed counsel, who has not petitioned. Britney Spears, Charlie Crist, you need to make sure that you don't put lies into the bills that you put and propose up, because the American public has a right to know the truth. The American public has a right to know that the people that we vote into office are going to tell us the truth and the things that they call findings. This isn't true. Have you read any of Britney's case? No. Pop icon Britney Spears has not unsuccessfully petitioned the judicial system to remove her father. That's not true. She's never petitioned the judicial system to remove her father because the person that the state put in place to protect her right has not, in fact, exercised them. That's the problem here. It isn't that Britney Spears has unsuccessfully done anything. It's the state-appointed attorney. It's the state-imposed attorney. And you know what's really laughable about all this? Britney did try to hire an attorney, and her due process rights and her rights to hire an attorney were violated. Her Sixth Amendment right to counsel was violated. She tried to hire an attorney and the Sixth Amendment right to counsel was violated, and so no one in 13 years has stepped up and remedied that wrong. There's no accountability. There's no oversight. There's no watchdog who comes in and says, where's the due process here? Where is the right to a speedy trial if your rights are going to be taken away? We, Mr. Chris, all due respect, we have a lot of laws already in place that are supposed to protect conservatees, and they're being broken. They're not being followed. And so the issue now that we have here is of judicial immunity. Because if we ever are to take Judge Brenda Penny or Reva Gates or Aviva K. Bob to court over their blatant infractions of the Constitution and their violations of many of Britney's fundamental rights, they are going to be protected by judicial immunity. And so what we really need to be talking about, if we're talking about pop icon Britney Spears petitioning to remove her father, like that's even the biggest of our concerns here. We need to talk about how we're going to protect people like pop icon Britney Spears' constitutional rights. Because so far, they have been completely trampled, and I haven't seen nobody talking about how they're going to remedy that. But you talking about giving more money for more conservators. That's what I see. Despite the fact that Britney has been a successful working artist for the past decade, her repeated requests to have her conservatorship removed have been denied. True. A request is not the same as a petition, though. So get it right. Do you have a law degree? You should use it. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States protects United States citizens and residents from being deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And y'all's solution is more conservators and giving my taxpayer money and all of our taxpayer money for more conservators. That's your solution? All of this sounds good, right? Britney has repeatedly requested to have the conservatorship removed. She does have a 14th Amendment right that was violated. Nothing that in this bill would have helped Britney's constitutional rights be respected. Nothing. Putting in another member of the club, another member of the team. Well, when Britney did try to hire a professional fiduciary, a private one, it so happened that the lawyer for that professional fiduciary, Bessemer Trust, used to be the mentor of the lawyer that was gonna have to be fighting against Britney's dad. So what's to stop that situation from happening in your bill? I see nothing. The allegations in the Orlando Sentinel, Tampa Bay Times about the inability of Britney Spears to free herself from her father's control indicate that state guardianship and conservatorship systems can deprive citizens or residents of life, liberty, and property without due process. True. Your solution is not a solution. You're packaging a conservatorship lobby bill that probably got dropped on your desk as something that would help Britney, and it wouldn't. And I'm more than happy to explain to you why it wouldn't if it's something you don't understand. In order to restore due process guaranteed by the 14th Amendment, federal government has to guarantee that citizens placed under conservatorship retain the right to petition to have their private guardian replaced, right? Drum roll, right? Drum fucking roll. In order to restore due process guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, we, daddy federal government, we alone have to step in and remedy this violation of the Constitution. And the way we're gonna remedy it is allowing you to petition to replace your current trafficker with a different, perhaps, trafficker. But this time it'll be paid for by the state. The right to petition to have their private guardian or conservator replaced. Not the right to replace, right? No. The right to petition. So even their own little stupid remedy isn't even guaranteed. Their remedy is not helpful. It's harmful. But even if it was helpful, this weak, shaky, I mean, I don't even want to, it's more like a puff of air than a freaking bill. Like this right here isn't going to actually even help you get your actual, like it just says you have a right to petition to have your private guardian. This doesn't even give you a right to say, hell no, I want another one. It just gives you a right to petition to maybe have your guardian replaced with a state guardian who is free from any financial conflict of interest. Well, I'm not sure that's going to exist unless they're working for free. The only way that a guardian can be free from a financial conflict of interest is if they're not getting paid. How on earth, Representative Christ and Mace, is someone going to be getting paid from conservatorships and yet still be free from a financial conflict of interest? Why would someone who's getting paid a salary from my conservatorship help me to end my conservatorship? Can you answer that question for me? Perhaps you can come by the Zoom and answer that question for us. How is it that if you're getting paid from having somebody being in a conservatorship, that you don't have a financial conflict of interest in trying to get them out of it? Because to me, and I'm right, that's a conflict of interest. So I would like to explain. I was going to say, come explain to me how it's not and all that. I'm not even going to go that far as to say that because it's a clear conflict of interest. There's no argument about it. So this needs to be completely scrapped. There's no hope for this bill. And people who understand the real problem need to propose a different one, because this right here is absolutely unacceptable. It's logically inconsistent. It's internally inconsistent. Doesn't even agree with its own self. It's riddled with material misstatements. I'm not going to call them lies because that would imply that you did it on purpose. So I'm not going to do that. If you leave this out to be talked about too much longer, I might start implying that though, so we'll have to see. Here's the rights that are established by this bill. Here's the rights you're gonna get. Communicate with a caseworker that tax dollars are paying for, even if your conservator doesn't want you to, okay? So what's to stop that caseworker from being like put in there by like the same judge that doesn't want to get outed? Like this doesn't actually help the corruption scheme at all. There are already these like state appointed people though in the probate court. These probate investigators sat there and heard Britney say, I've been trafficked, I've been abused, I've been medicated, I've been drugged, I've been all of this stuff. Did those state appointed workers do anything? Samuel Ingham was state appointed. He heard Britney asking since 2014 to get out of this thing. He's state appointed. What stopped him? He's been clearly working with the other side. He wasn't supposed to work with those people. He has an ethical duty too, a professional and ethical duty to not be working with them all in cahoots like that. He hasn't protected Britney's rights. Why? There's no oversight. This should be an oversight bill. This should be a cancellation of judicial immunity. This should be something else. All this is giving hundreds of millions of dollars in financial incentives for more conservators. Why? Why? The second right you would be getting, to petition the court to replace any person as a legal guardian or conservator if they're not an employee of the state with a legal guardian or conservator that is an employee of the state. So let's say you have one of these state appointed conservators, right? And you don't like them. This bill does not give you the right to replace them. It only gives you the right to replace a Jody Montgomery. Let's say Jody Montgomery was like a state appointed caseworker. This gives you no extra rights for that. So your rights that you get is to be able to communicate with a caseworker that's getting paid by the government and to be able to petition the court to replace your private guardian with a public state-funded one. But if you have a state-funded guardian you don't like, too bad, so sad. That's it. End of the road. So you might get something worse that second time, and now you're stuck with them until you die, because they're not going to help you get out of this. Why? This doesn't actually help you get out of this. In any proceeding, the petitioner shall not be required to prove wrongdoing or malfeasance by the legal guardian. Okay, so in some states right now, you have to kind of show that the legal guardian did something bad or wrong in order to replace them. And this is why I think they wanted to call it the Free Britney Act, because they thought we, the fans, and we, the activists in the Free Britney movement, were stupid. They thought we were so uneducated as to think, oh, Britney wants to remove her father without actually proving he did anything wrong, and so this would help her do that. But it wouldn't, because we would still need her lawyer to file a petition. But you think there's a lot of conservatives, like a lot of people even watching this right now, who would be able to file a petition with a court? No, you need a lawyer to do it. So you still would have these state-appointed lawyers not respecting their clients' rights and wishes, and they still would have no accountability and no oversight. But you have the right to talk to a caseworker and swap in a state-funded trafficker. That's your two rights you're getting with this bill, at an enormous expense to taxpayers, $260 million. What if we took some of those millions of dollars and made rehabilitation programs for people at conservatorships? What if we taught conservatees that are like, I don't know, start to learn how to do more things on their own? What if we had, I don't know, like funding for people to try and help think about ways that we can end conservatorships? helps? What if the $260 million went to something like that instead of more conservators that are going to take away more people's rights? This is lawyers gone wild. Then you also inherit a private right of action. The individual subject to a legal guardianship or conservatorship established under state law may bring an action in any district court to enforce any right provided by subsection B. Well, the subsection B is freaking talking to a caseworker and replacing your conservator. So you go all the way to the appeals court and you're going to go to the federal and you're going to tell them. And then when you get there, you know what you're going to say? They didn't let me talk to a caseworker. They didn't let me swap out my private guardian with a state-funded one. That's it. That's what you get to go to the appeals court for. This isn't letting you go to the appeals court because you were put in there illegally. This isn't letting you go and get your money back that they stole from you from a fraudulent conservatorship. This isn't letting you do anything other than appeal that they won't let you talk to a caseworker. And this is what I was talking about when I said table scrap. This wouldn't have helped Britney. Right now, if Britney had this bill in place, you know what she would do? She would petition to get rid of her dad, and then a state-appointed one would be put in place. Do y'all think anything working in the Stanley Moss courthouse hasn't worked with everybody else in there before? Is that independent? They don't even freaking use the term independent because they know. Not independent. This is a government-sanctioned money grab. This is a farce. And then the relief that the court is going to provide is whatever the court deems appropriate. That's your relief. So you do all that. You go to the appeals court, you tell them what happened. Yeah, I wasn't allowed to talk to it, this and that, Now the appeals court might just say, too bad, and you might go back to where you were and get abused even more for trying to whistleblow. There's nothing in place that would protect you from that. So, I can think of only problems with this bill. I cannot think of a single way that this would help Britney, and I cannot think of a single way this would help free anyone. It only adds hundreds of millions of dollars in perverse financial incentives funded by taxpayers to allow the government to come in and get a piece of the pie in the conservatorship money-making scam. That's pretty much all I have to say about that.